fire power of the Mohawk Warrior Societies of Aquasasmi, Emasataki, Kanawaki, and a rearguard attack by Italian Danenga was more than they could handle, and ultimately took the military person ran for cover. The Christian propagandists told the president the reason they scrapped the assault by the JTF-2 is because cooler has prevailed, and the government will try to starve us out by dropping the cost of cigarettes in the province and eat $1 billion tax loss to put the Mohawks out of work. This is the classic case of economic racism and genocide, second only to Kit Carson's tactics of burning out crops of Indian people and starving them to death. One major reason that the JTF-2 took flight was because Mohawk warriors utilized strategic psychological warfare with superior military precision and fired thousands of rounds of bullets into valleys and gorges that echoed extreme danger. The strategy filled the potential assault force without imaginable fear. The author of this report to Parliament knows this to be true as a fact as he was there in the bunkers facing the JTF-2 and Operation Saxon Scorpion in Onondaga Indian Territory in Ontario. Basically what that was a psychological thing to scare them away. And this JTF-2 in fact was scared away. And of course they said cool heads prevailed. They just basically left because they thought there might be an equal force to contend with them. The military still needed a reason, a justification for the JTF-2 and would have to prove its worth to the higher ups in the Cretan cabinet. In May of 1994, former Solicitor General Herb Gray, Deputy Solicitor General Jean Fournier, Deputy Minister Defense Minister David Colonette and Deputy Defense Minister Robert Fowler were all given a spectacular display of the deadly skills of the JTF-2 in their killing house routines. This display was put on as a prelude to the JTF-2's next mission that was dubbed Exercise Praetorian. This exercise was to be performed in Victoria, BC before the Commonwealth Games, where they would simulate terrorist attacks and commence to counter the assault. While climbing up a ladder using live ammunition and explosives, one JTF-2 member blew his hand off. In a similar situation in Gustafson Lake, British Columbia, a Canadian soldier named Michael Schluter blew his hand off, setting up tripwires for stun grenades around the encampment of mostly women and children. He would eventually sue the Canadian government for forcing him to act outside the rules of engagement he was led to believe was a strictly supportive role of the Army and not actual combat engagement. Schluter also served 15 years with the Princess Pat. Was he also a member of JTF-2? Schluter told me in a telephone conversation recorded word for word in the autobiography of Split in the Sky, written with T. Kistador, that he was not, nor did he think JTF-2 was at the standoff. Recent information disclosures which will come at the conclusion of this report to Parliament will drastically differ with Schluter's statement and possibly prove that he and others were JTF-2 operatives. The soldier that blew his hand off at Victoria refused to give the nurses attending his wounds his name for fear of violating his sworn oath not to divulge his membership to the JTF-2. An RCMP superintendent named Kelly Ford tried to downplay the incident and called the exercise a success. The next mission for the JTF-2 will leap forward to 1998 in Calgary, Canada, in order to lay basis for an earlier incident in 1994 of utmost interest. And I think what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to capsulize this report because it is long. And I'm going to tell you basically what happened. At this in 1998, in Calgary, right here, Alberta, there was a bank heist that took place. Two people by the name of Ryan, last name, and Bass tried to stick up the bank over here in Calgary to get away with $400,000 worth of loot. The security guards that came in, does anybody remember that? Security guards came in, they got into a big firefight. They went out without the loot. were two people by the name of Thomas Koch and another one by the name of Brent Conway. Now, these two guys were later to be found out to be JTF-2 operatives. So you got JTF-2 operatives involved in a bank heist in 1998. Now, remember that name, Conway. Now, there's another incident that happened. In 1992, there was a group of masked men in black outfits and black balaclavas, who were sent to a citadel in Quebec to see how the security was around the weapons inside the citadel. So when they went there, and overpowered the guards. They seized the weapons, but when they overpowered the Quebec guards, they stuck guns up their asses. They beat them and tortured them. One of these guys stuck a baton up this Frenchman's ass and lifted him off the air. Well, the guy that did that was a guy by the name of Michael Rainville. So remember the words Rainville and Conway. Now, in 1994, the Canadian government was involved illegally in a war in Somalia. In that Somalia, how many people remember Somalia inquiry? You gotta remember that. Otherwise, you don't have a TV. But in 1994, there's the Somalia inquiry going on. 1995 to 1997. All of a sudden, John Chen shuts down the Somalia inquiry. Why? Well, because on that fateful night, that horrible night of March the 4th, 1994, you've got two young Somalian boys looking for something to eat. You've got a squadron, a platoon over there in Somalia, setting out water and food to draw them in as bait. Then when they come in, the commanders, the majors of that operation, ordered to go get those two Somalian boys. And not only did they order, but they actually shot and blew holes in these kids, killing one and let the other one almost died and is permanently paralyzed to date. Well, the names of those two guys, two Indian guys by the name of Clayton Matchey and another one by the name of Kyle Brown, three Indians from this area, were the ones that became the fall guys. Clayton Matchey was going to say who they really was that killed them at the Somalian inquiry. All of a sudden, he comes up dead by suicide in a military court. But in reality, when they finally, done through the research done by David Puglisi from the Ottawa Citizen, the names of the two people that would have been submitted to the Somali inquiry just before Free Gen shut it down was Michael Rainville and Brent Conway. One guy is sticking guns up the Quebec Citadel security guard officers' butts, and the other one that's involved in the bank robbery, and they're both JTF-2 operatives. And if the Canadian people had known in 1994 that the first overseas operations of the Joint Task Force 2 involved these guys that were involved in the Somalia incident over there in Somalia, they would have shut down, they would have disbanded the JTF-2. In fact, somebody else became disbanded. The Fall Guys was with the Airborne Division, and that's why they disbanded the 82nd Airborne. But it was really the JTF-2 that will do the dirty work. Then, of course, when we go on the rest of this report over here, basically goes into an article that happened about in Vancouver. The Vancouver Sun has a report, has a release of David Puglisi's book that basically says that they were out there operating up the South Simile and having the RCMP confirm that they were in fact up there being trained in the use of landmines all around the parameters, like I say in the book, and that they were also being planned to be used on September the 18th to go in for the all-out kill. If I hadn't gotten the old medicine man from Holy Alberta, to go back in and pull everybody out on September 17th, everybody would have been killed by the Canadian Joint Task Force 2 on September 18, 1995. And that, my friends, is why we have to get a coalition of international organizations to back the call for this inquiry. And let's put it this way, the inquiry is already done. I've done the inquiry. So the next thing we need is to get in the military with some monetary compensation. And if we don't get that, we don't get the support of organizations like the AFN and others throughout this country, then we're all letting fascism in a police state totalitarian go on the rise. We have to go on the offensive, otherwise we get a coalition. If they don't compensate us and apologize and admit to their wrongs and delay, then we are going to the International Criminal Court at The Hague when it convenes in July, and Canada will be brought up on charges of genocide, and that concludes this particular portion. Let's take a break. Thank you.
Review of the book. So at the end of the interview, he looks at me and he says, man, he said, that was a good interview. Geez, thanks, bro. Appreciate that coming from you. Respected man like yourself, Elder. So he looks at me and says, but I just feel cheated in the sense of it. Cheated? For what? He said, because you didn't tell me how to close the ticket.
And my friend Norman here, he tells me that his buddy calls him up. He's got the book, he says, geez, you put that thing in. Seems like he's a pervert. Norman said, no. Tell him he just keep reading. Keep reading. It'll clear itself up, right, Norman? Okay.
Okay, how about everybody come up a little closer here?
You don't want to get too close, eh? Get much of a rub off.
That's your choice. Okay. Cameraman, you ready? Because this is it. This is it. The secret on that. All right. Okay, so I'm just gonna probably take about a half hour, but it's some very important stuff right now. Okay. I have said over the years that I have been put into orphanages and boarding schools and have been fought for years to fight against the kind of attacks that were trying to sexually abuse me, sexually abuse a lot of the Indian children that were in these boarding schools. And after the child welfare department came and took us away when my father died, at the one time, Native women's single in the 50s, governments would come and just snatch the kids and put us in the white foster homes or in the residential schools. And so I was one of those kids, and all my brothers and sisters, and we all ended up separated for the rest of our lives. And I talk about in the book all the years of what that was like, the loneliness, the pains, and fighting off the potential sexual attacks. And so I go through all of that. Fortunately, I was able to muster up enough strength to fight it off. I screamed louder than anybody else. And so I was able to, somehow there would be somebody that worked there to say, hey, you know, I'll go to somebody on the outside about you with these priests and these guards that work there. So anyways, the long and short is, most of my life was put behind walls because they kidnapped me and put me into institutions. Now, the more I fought back inside of these institutions from abuse or torture, beatings, the more they would try to increase the punishment against me, the beatings and the confinement, the cells, the padded cells. And so I talk about all that in jails. And I skipped all the way to the point of, I'm going to jump all the way to the fact that for the one time in my life, out of desperation, for the only year of my life that I was out on the streets of Buffalo, New York, at the age of 17, out of desperation, I had no place to stay. I was freezing 30 below zero, sleeping in the halls. Out of desperation, I tried to stick up a store.